Thank you very much. So, my name is Dr. Raj Persaud, and I am a consultant psychiatrist, which means that on a daily basis in my clinic, I see people who, for various reasons, have become extremely unhappy. They may be unhappy because of marital breakdown or recovering from some kind of trauma. So there is a sense in which I am clinically at the front line of the problem and the elusive nature of happiness. And I want to talk to you based on my clinical experience and also the latest psychological research about how to be happy. And I've got some good news and some bad news. The good news is, I'm going to argue that happiness is very possible, and indeed surprisingly possible. The bad news is that I know for the next 15 minutes of my talk that I'm going to profoundly irritate you. I'm really sorry about that. I'm going to apologize profusely for the fact that you are going to find the next 15 minutes some of the most annoying of your life. But that is because I'm going to attack your most cherished beliefs about the nature of happiness. And it's going to be disturbing and upsetting to have your most cherished beliefs attacked. And again, I'm very sorry about that. One of the beliefs you may hold is the idea that happiness is, in some sense, very elusive. Another belief you may have is that actually there's something profoundly unintelligent about people who are happy. There's an idea that actually you must be a bit dumb to be happy if you don't really grasp the serious problems we're facing on the world, the problems of climate change, etc., that you're a bit gormless if you go around saying, I'm really happy. There is a sense in which a very common belief is that the very pursuit of happiness is what makes people unhappy. This is a very common idea. And I'm going to attack and challenge all those ideas, and I'm really sorry that it's going to upset you. There's something paradoxical about the fact that I'm telling you how to be happy, but I'm going to upset you in the process. And I'm sorry, again, about that. But actually, deep within the happiness problem is that paradox. There's a sense in which how to endure a certain amount of unhappiness is part of the secret of how to be happy. And one of the first problems I want to tackle straight away is that actually one of the serious problems is people don't really understand what the word happiness means. They bandy it around. You'll open the newspapers and see a latest COD psychology piece on the latest research on how to be happy, but at no point does anyone define the word. And that's where people start going seriously wrong. If you read a magazine article about how to be happy and no one discusses with you what the word really means, you can discard that article straight away. It's almost certainly a waste of time. I'm going to illustrate this problem by telling you a true story. The story comes from the 1960s. Harold Macmillan, a very patrician Prime Minister of the UK of the time, was attending a very solemn, somber occasion, which was a big state occasion where France was commemorating and celebrating the retirement of the great, great French President Charles de Gaulle. And in this very long and somber ceremony full of pomp and circumstance, this very patrician Prime Minister, Harold Macmillan, representing the UK at this event, found himself standing next to Madame de Gaulle, the wife of President de Gaulle. In an attempt to make conversation with her, he turned to her and he asked her what she was most looking forward to following the retirement of President Charles de Gaulle. Harold Macmillan was somewhat surprised, startled, and shocked by the answer that Madame de Gaulle gave. Because when Madame de Gaulle was asked by Harold Macmillan, the Prime Minister of Britain, what she was most looking forward to following the retirement of President Charles de Gaulle, Madame de Gaulle said, a penis. Harold Macmillan was very startled and shocked and surprised by this answer and struggled with how to respond. I mean, how do you respond if someone says that to you? So I think he turned away from Madame de Gaulle and tried to make conversation with the person on the other side of him. It was only later that Harold Macmillan, reflecting on what Madame de Gaulle had said, realized that what Madame de Gaulle had probably been trying to say through a very heavy French accent was the word happiness. And there you see the problem with the word, which is, what are people referring to when they use that word? Now, in fact, there's actually two kinds of happiness. And I want to talk a little bit about what those two kinds are, because it's a really important step in how to be happy, is understanding that the one word covers two very different kinds of happiness. And the very first person to realize this was an ancient Greek philosopher called Aristotle, who was alive around 2,300 years ago. Now, Aristotle is one of the towering figures of Western intellectual thought. There are many things that would make him a man of the millennium. He was the tutor to Alexander the Great, the man who conquered basically all the known world of the time. And one of Aristotle's great achievements, for example, is the discovery or the invention of logic. Now, right next to you is probably your mobile phone. Your mobile phone is basically a small computer, and what computers do is they perform logical operations. And so there is a sense in which this discovery is so momentous 2,300 years ago that all of you right now, when you're carrying your mobile phone around with you, are carrying a bit of Aristotle. So when a man of this importance in terms of intellectual depth and breadth has something to say about happiness, it's time to sit up and pay attention. And Aristotle has an argument that happiness is the ultimate purpose of life. And this is a very important argument I'm going to run through with you. The next time you're at a middle-class dinner party, in the middle of the banter, turn to the person sitting on your right or left and say, what do you think is the ultimate purpose of life? Feel the temperature drop in the room. I'm going to give you an argument which supplies an answer to that question. Aristotle says happiness is the ultimate purpose of life, and here is his argument. Aristotle would hang out in the marketplace in ancient Greece. People would walk by hurriedly on their way to work, and Aristotle had this nasty habit of the philosophers of those days of stopping people as they wandered and rushed off to work to ask them questions like, can you tell me what truth is? Can you tell me what justice is? And people would say, yes, I know what truth is, and they would give an answer, and then Aristotle would machine gun their answer by questioning them that actually they didn't really know what truth or justice was. So Aristotle stops a person running through the marketplace, says, where are you running off to in such a hurry? And the man says, I'm on the way to make the Senate. Why are you on the way to the Senate? I have to give a speech. Why do you have to give a speech? I'm going to pause right there. You can see why these philosophers were really irritating. They had a five-year-old approach to yes, but why, yes, but why, yes, but why, in a kind of infinite regress. And that's one of the reasons why Socrates, the teacher of Aristotle, actually gets put to death by the citizens of Athens, because they found him really irritating. Anyway, so Aristotle stops you as you're running through the marketplace. Where are you going? I'm going to the Senate. Why are you going to the Senate? Because I need to make a speech. Why do you need to make a speech? Because I have to get votes. Why do you have to get votes? Because I need to be popular. Why do you need to be popular? Because then I'll have power. Why do you have power? Because then I'll make the world a better place. Why do you need to make the world a better place? Because it will make me happy. Aristotle says, when you start that infinite regress, no matter where you begin, why do you want money? Why do you want power? You always end up with because it will make you happy. And here's the really interesting thing. All roads lead to Rome. Wherever you start, you're going to end up with the final ultimate answer, because it will make me happy. And here's the other interesting thing. It doesn't seem to make sense to carry on the infinite regress. It doesn't seem to make sense to say, yes, but why do you want to be happy? Okay, so that's a very important point. It seems to end there. It always seems to make sense, whatever answer else you might give, yes, but why do you want money, seems to make sense. It doesn't seem to make sense to say, yes, but why do you want to be happy? The point stops there. And that's one of the reasons why Aristotle says happiness is the ultimate point of life. He has another very interesting argument which is less well known, and it runs something like this. I need to apologize in advance. This is an incredibly sexist anecdote. But I'm going to have to tell it the way Aristotle told it to just capture the idiom of the time. It's incredibly sexist. I'm apologizing again for that. But it's because Aristotle was alive 2,300 years ago, so they weren't at the cutting edge of feminist thinking at the time. So Aristotle has this anecdote. You're at a party, it's a glittering party, it's full of celebrities, famous people, wealthy people. You're with a friend says, hey, you see that guy over there? That guy is officially the richest man in the world. He's richer than God. in the Sunday Times rich list. He is above all the others. He is extremely wealthy. He is the wealthiest man on the planet. And you may turn to your friend and you say, yes, I remember reading something about him. You're right, that man is the richest man on earth. But you know something? I also read a recent newspaper article which said, he's not happy. Implausible, maybe, but we're always reading newspaper articles and magazine articles about very wealthy people who aren't happy. So Aristotle's point is that it seems that unlike any other purpose in life, if you pursue money, for example, it is entirely possible to have a detraction point at which money doesn't serve the ultimate purpose. Money doesn't work. At this same party, here comes the sexist example, you point to a woman, you say, you see that woman over there? She is officially the most beautiful woman on the planet. They've done research, they've done surveys, and she is the most beautiful woman on the planet. And your friend may say, yes, I agree with you, I read that research. She is the most beautiful woman on the planet, but you know what? I also read something recently which said, she's not happy. Again, it seems as if beauty is something that's not worth pursuing ultimately, but because it's possible there could be a fly in the ointment. Imagine you're at the same party, Aristotle presses the point, and you point to a man. You see the man over there, that man over there, that man, the research indicates he is the happiest man on the planet. They've done surveys, brain scanning research. He is the happiest man on the planet. Would it make sense for your friend to go, yes, but you know what? He's not very rich. It doesn't seem to make any sense. It makes no difference what detracting factors he may have. If he is officially the happiest person on the planet, then it doesn't matter. Therefore, happiness has to be the ultimate purpose of life. If you point to a woman at the glittering party, you see that woman over there, they've done research, they've done brain scanning studies, she is officially the happiest woman on the planet. Would it make sense for your friend to say, yes, but she's not very good looking, is she? It doesn't seem to matter. It seems trite. It seems besides the point. Therefore, happiness is the only answer to the question, what is the ultimate purpose of life? Because there's no detraction point that would take away from that point of happiness. Okay, so Aristotle thinks there are two kinds of happiness. And the really interesting thing is the latest psychological research backs him up and confirms this idea. Now, psychologists, being very imaginative people, have decided to name these two types of happiness type 1 happiness and type 2 happiness. So type 1 happiness is the kind of happiness you feel when you have a nice glass of wine, have a nice meal, hang out with friends. We call this a kind of pleasure, hedonistic element of happiness. Type 1 happiness is very reliable, but somewhat transient. About 3 weeks after that great holiday, you're not really as happy as you were during the holiday. And about 4 weeks later, your happiness levels are back to what they were before you went on holiday. So the problem with type 1 happiness is it's reliable but transient. The other interesting thing about type 1 happiness is it's usually biological. It's sensual. It's linked to your biology. You are biologically programmed to enjoy the taste of honey or to find certain things fun. There's an evolutionary prerogative which explains why those things make you happy. If you were to go out into the West End of London this evening, you can buy every kind of type 1 happiness. It's all available for sale. What's type 2 happiness? The mistake is to believe that all happiness is just type 1. Type 2 happiness is a more intellectual, cognitive feeling or satisfaction you get from the sense of feeling pride in the direction your life is taking. So type 2 happiness is usually about the overcoming of difficulty, the pride you get for finishing your PhD thesis, getting a great degree, writing a book, doing charitable work. You've been hearing about some great charities and causes today, but going and helping those people is a kind of type 2 happiness. Nursing a sick child through the night. No one enjoys nursing a sick child through the night. There's no type 1 pleasure in that. But when the child is alive the next morning, there's a certain type 2 satisfaction to be gained from that. So I want you to know something else about the difference between type 1 and type 2. Type 2 happiness means you give something to the world and you get a satisfaction back. Type 1 happiness, you have to pay the world and then the world gives something to you. There's a different transaction. I want you also to notice something else, that type 1 and type 2 happiness pull against each other. The more you're pursuing type 1 happiness, that nice glass of wine, the less time you've got to finish your PhD thesis. Also, the more you pursue your PhD thesis, the less time you have to stop and smell the flowers, the less time you have to enjoy life. So here is an ultimate secret to happiness. have the right balance of type 1 and type 2 happiness in your life. And I want to suggest that now and this is going to sound slightly mechanical, as you go through your day, start labeling the happinesses. What am I doing right now? Is this a type 1 happiness or a type 2 happiness? And if all your day is full of nothing but type 1 happiness, then something's going wrong, and you're not going to end up being ultimately happy. So the answer to life, the universe, and everything is have the right balance of type 1 and type 2 happiness. And where people go wrong is they tend to end up pursuing one over the other, or they don't understand there's two kinds of happinesses. The other key point about understanding deep within, embedded within the word happiness, there's more complexity, is that there's different intensity levels of happiness. So we could construct a crude scale of 0 to 10, where 10 measures your happiness levels, and 10 is at the top and 0 is at the bottom. So we could survey you in this room, and there'll be a group of people scoring 4, 5, or 6 on our crude happiness scale. We would call those people the mildly content. There'll be people scoring 8, 9, or 10 who, as I'm talking to you now, are experiencing what we might call throbbing ecstasy. And then there's some other people who'll be scoring 0, 1, 2, or 3, and who'll be very, very upset and low indeed. By the way, can I just address the people who are experiencing throbbing ecstasy as I'm talking to you? And can I just say to you, you really need to get out more. Now, the really interesting thing is if we were to survey you today and get your scores on happiness levels, and there'll be some people scoring 8, 9, or 10, a large number of people clustered in the middle, getting the mild contentment, some people scoring 0, 1, 2, or 3. If we were to survey you in a year later, we all meet again for another TEDx event, and a TED Talk event, and we measure the happiness levels, we would find that the people who are scoring 4, 5, and 6 a year earlier would be very likely to be scoring 4, 5, and 6 again. In other words, mild contentment is incredibly stable. The people who are scoring 8, 9, or 10 or throbbing ecstasy are extremely unlikely to have had the impact of my talk last all year, and they're very unlikely to be hitting 8, 9, and 10. In fact, they're more likely to be at the 0, 1, 2, or 3. In other words, beware the pursuit of intense happiness. We live in an advertising culture that drapes attractive people over the bonnets of sports cars to say you're going to have intense happiness if you buy this product. Beware that. In fact, the best thing to go for is not intense happiness, which is what modern culture presses upon you through advertising and the media, but the less sexy, more boring thing, but more stable thing to go for is mild contentment. It's not a very sexy message, is it? You can't imagine it galvanizing people. You can't imagine people, millions of people marching on Parliament going, what do we want? Mild contentment. When do we want it? Well, whenever you can get around to it, because we're like mildly content anyway. Okay, so another secret to life, the universe, and everything in terms of happiness is beware the pursuit of 8, 9, and 10. Go after mild contentment. It's not sexy, but it's incredibly stable. And that might be the best thing to go to. Okay, one final point I want to make about the secret of happiness. Famous recent psychology experiment was done whereby people were given a mundane photocopying task. They had to photocopy some work. It was very boring. And in condition one of the experiment, they do the photocopying task, and then they're asked by their psychologist, how happy are you? And happiness in the sense of how happy are you over your whole life? In condition 2 of the experiment, another group of people who do exactly the same task, boring photocopying task, but they're engineered by the experimenter to discover, unknown to them, they discover a small amount of change left in the photocopying machine they get to keep. It's like 50 pence. It's trivial, okay? But when those people are asked to rate how happy they are with their whole lives in general, they're incredibly happier than the other people who didn't find the 50 pence piece. Okay, so it's a bit of a mystery. Why would finding 50 pence make you so incredibly deliriously happy over the whole of your lifespan? And the argument is there's something about unexpected things, unexpected benefits, unexpected gifts that actually are massive in terms of making us happy. And there is a paradox right there. How do you generate the unexpected? How do you reliably produce the unexpected? Well, you have to take risks. You heard a talk earlier about festivals. There was a sense in which at those festivals there was a gambling open-mindedness. You were being told that anything could happen, and you need to take the risk of anything happening a bit more. And basically, the ultimate conclusion I want to make is understand there's only two kinds of happiness, type 1 and type 2. Understand Don't go for throbbing ecstasy, go for mild contentment, and look for that hidden 50p piece. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's a great talk to end the day. You always spend a lot of time thinking about the science and philosophy around happiness. I'm really intrigued to know, whenever you get a therapist up on stage, you can grill them a little bit. What are the type 1 and type 2 happinesses that you experience?
Well, I have a lot of
Huge.
hobbies and interests. In fact, I have so many hobbies and interests, my wife is convinced I've retired. She's always asking me when I go out the front door, are you actually going to work? And I think it's really interesting. We were constrained by our time, by our workplace. When people are given free time, what they do in their free time is very interesting because people are incredibly conformist there. And they do kind of what everyone else expects them to do. And I'm going to argue that one of the things that I do, which is going to sound very unexpected to you, is an example of I think people should take more risks. So I play a lot of sports. I love golf. I play tennis. But I've taken up recently a very interesting sport called beach tennis. Now, whenever I talk to people about beach tennis, they sort of burst out laughing. They don't believe it's a serious sport. It's played on a beach volleyball court with a net that's slightly lower than a beach volleyball net. It's played with 4 people. It's a doubles game. And I'm UK-ranked men's. Last year, I was UK-ranked men's number 17 in beach tennis, which I find if you casually mention that in bars, it's very, very impressive. My wife, and one's wife obviously tends to be a bit suspicious when you say these things. She said, wait a minute. She said, how many men actually play beach tennis in the UK? She said, is it 15? Which I thought was very, very harsh. So I think that people should take a few more risks in their spare time. So one example is that I play beach tennis, which is a slightly crazy thing to do. I've just come back from Aruba, the World Championships in beach tennis. I got creamed most of the time because people at the World Championship tend to be rather good, I've discovered. And I was thinking of you all when I got this T-shirt because I know I was going to be coming here and talking about happiness. And I thought this T-shirt was very appropriate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.